Well, a massive leak of over 90,000 secret US military files has exposed cover-ups over the war in Afghanistan. The classified documents were handed to 3 newspapers by the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks. They include reports on the deaths of hundreds of civilians, increased Taliban attacks, as well as NATO fears that Pakistan and Iran are backing the insurgency. RT's Laura Emmett has more from London.
This is essentially a detailed account of the last six years of the war in Afghanistan. It begins at the beginning of 2004 and ends right at the end of 2009. And there has been quite a lot of both criticism and scepticism about these documents. Criticism from the White House, which says that the release of documents like these could lead to danger for the personnel who are there on the ground and compromising operations. And scepticism about whether this is really new information. Military experts are saying that we've always known that there was corruption going on in the war in Afghanistan and that this is nothing new, essentially. But nevertheless, these 90,000 documents, many of them refer to the toll that the Afghan war has taken on civilians. There are 144 detailed incidents of the deaths of civilians during this conflict. Some of them have been from controversial airstrikes that we've already seen a lot of in the news and that the Afghan government has complained about. But some of them also were from something as simple as troops shooting at unarmed civilians on the streets, either the drivers of cars or the drivers of motorcycles, because they wrongly thought that they could be suicide bombers. There's details in these reports of 195 civilians killed and 174 wounded, but that's considered to be a massive underestimate. There are, we assume, more that have not been revealed by these documents. Also, something very worrying about Pakistan. Now, Pakistan receives $1 billion a year from the US government to support the fight against Afghan insurgency. But what we're seeing from these documents is, in fact, that the Pakistani spy service appears to be holding secret meetings with the Taliban in order to organize the militant groups that are fighting US soldiers. So those are just some of the things that we can see in these documents.
The real story of this material is that it's war. It's one damn thing after another. It is the continuous small events, the continuous deaths of children, insurgents, allied forces.
He said that he was expecting that people whose abuse he had exposed would come out and criticize him, essentially shooting the messenger. And he also denied the fact that these leaks would cause any kind of operational insecurity or danger for the troops that are on the ground. He said all the documents that he's released are 7 months old and so have no real bearing on what's going on operationally in Afghanistan at the moment. He said that he had a harm minimization process. Those were his words. He also defended the reliability of these documents. He said there are instructions on the WikiLeaks website about how to read these documents. Obviously, we should exercise caution while reading them, but he's confident that they are all accurate accounts.
RT's Laura Emmett reporting there from London. Let's get some more analysis on this right now from political analyst Christoph Horstel, who joins us live from the German capital, Berlin. Good to see you, sir. So there's been some criticism of the leak from the White House, but it didn't seem particularly harsh. Why do you think that is?
Well, you see, 91,000 documents coming out of WikiLeaks. It is very clear that without some kind of tacit okay from US institutions, WikiLeaks would not have been able to publish anything. And what we see here and what we have to make of this is what the New York Times writes. Pakistan aids insurgency in Afghanistan, reports assert. That is what on page A1 the New York Times carries this morning. And they use the whole WikiLeaks information to accuse Pakistan of a double game. And they say about this double game, the flood of reports of Pakistani complicity in the insurgency, I read from New York Times this morning, has at times led to barely disguised tensions between American and Pakistani officers in the ground. And it rattles on and on for 10 pages with New York Times with accusations of double game against Pakistan. And what I accuse the New York Times and what I accuse American institutions of is of lying all the time in their teeth.
So I'm sorry if I may, Mr. Horstel.
If this double game,
there are going to be conspiracy theorists having a field day with this. So with these leaked documents, you're drawing Pakistan into the story now.
No, it's not me. This is the New York Times doing it, and the New York Times is the voice of America, so to say. They draw Pakistan into that, and I don't know how they managed to read the 91,000 documents and find out this truth in them. But explicitly they talk about WikiLeaks. The documents, New York Times writes, made available by an organization called WikiLeaks, and then they start rattling off. And that is something which I find very astonishing, and it reminds me, in fact, of the practice of 9/11, when America knew within seconds that this was a bad, beardy Osama bin Laden killing American citizens. And what we have here somehow is making use of these leaked documents to make a case that Pakistan is not playing straight in this war, in this so-called war against terror. And that's, of course, wrong. What I say is, and I have proof for that, and I've written 3 books on it, America itself is playing a double game, and it's forcing Pakistan to play this double game alongside America. That's what's going on right now, and all the rest of this is a dirty lie, and we should not believe anything of it.
All right, so we've already had a partial reaction from Capitol Hill saying, well, these leaked documents are now undermining our project to promote stability in Afghanistan. But NATO's European members say that they hope the League won't harm the current situation in that war-torn country. What's your take on this?
Well, you see, I have checked this material now for several hours on end. What I find out is that it's interesting to read it. I think the stuff is genuine. It is not worthless to read it, but certainly, how to say, it is soft material. There are much bigger cases, both in politics, and WikiLeaks, how to say, admits to that they don't have the big political cases. They just have, you know, the day-to-day basis events that happen on the battleground. That is good to read, but of course also these events are so to say screened. Yeah, you don't get the real tough things, you get some softer things. For example, when there's a green on green, as they call it, if, how to say, uniformed Afghan security forces open fire on other uniformed Afghan forces. Well, these cases are rare, according to this material, and there are not so many dead to mourn. But the fact is, for example, that the Afghan National Police has at times stolen whole convoys of diesel tank trucks, and that the army had to go after them and find these trucks and bring them back on the road. And of course there were killings in these cases, and this case, which was in Afghan TV, for example, does not take place in WikiLeaks. And this means WikiLeaks got a softened version of what is really going on today in Afghanistan.
All right, so we'll be keeping our ears to the ground for more developments on this story. Political analyst Christoph Horstel from Berlin. Thank you. Well, Robert Fisk, the Middle East correspondent for the British daily, The Independent, says the internet's stepping on the toes of newspaper and television journalism.
We've got all these expensive newspapers with huge investigative staffs, Washington Post, New York Times, in London, in France. And yet we didn't get this story. It was the internet that got it. This is the most important proof so far that in many ways newspaper journalism is retreating and going along with authority. Please, can I be embedded? I mean, I'm not embedded, but please, can I be embedded? Can I go with the 10th Mountain Division? Can I be with the British Army? And these reporters are not getting the story. And these people, this WikiLeaks organization, which I have some serious concerns, they've managed to do it on a mass bulk scale that we've never seen recently in modern newspaper journalism or television journalism. This, I think, is one of the lessons for us journalists.